Well, I was born in London in 1936, which was before the war. And I was, as soon as I was born, they discovered that I was asthmatic. I had terrible asthma. And the drugs in those days were not that sophisticated. So I suffered quite a lot as a small child. But, as with all of these things, I kind of was able to get along with it. I had my own life. My parents, my father was in the Royal Air Force, and my mother, before the war, was a teacher. And they, I guess, were very scared for me. They were scared anyway. We all were during the war. And I have memories at a very young age when Hitler was flattening London with his bombs, of going down into the cellar of the house where we lived in Hampstead in London and hiding there. Strangely enough, someone told me that there was a wolf down there. I was a 6-year-old, and I was far more scared of the wolf than I was of Hitler and his Luftwaffe. And that's being a child, I guess. After the war, I had very, very well. Throughout the whole of my childhood, I had very, very bad schooling because I was continually asthmatic. If I went to school, I would be there for a week or maybe 10 days, and another attack would come, and I'd be out of school for 2 weeks. And nearly all of my reports at that time say Gerald tries very hard, he works hard, but unfortunately, and there was always that word, unfortunately, his illness keeps him from school. So I would say that I'm ill-educated in that way. But the one thing I could do was draw. And I think drawing, even at that early time, became my way of expressing myself, putting myself onto paper and explaining the world to myself, really, my fears, in fact. And I continued to do that right the way up until I guess I left school at about 16, which is the usual age when people go on to further education and go on to university or something like that. But my father, who was in banking, thought that being an artist was an insecure job. He's absolutely right. It is an insecure job. I've been lucky, as it turns out, over the years. But there are many artists, like there are other people in the arts, waiting on tables in McDonald's or wherever, And however, my father, although it was evident to everybody else that I should have been put into an art school, the art world, he thought he would try and get me into a bank. And I did various bank interviews, and I failed them all, absolutely failed them all, because, I think I wanted to fail them all because I knew that being into banking for me was like the other end of the spectrum to where I wanted to be. And so eventually I began to draw cartoons, which I'd been drawing all the time, and send them to various magazines. In the meantime, I was working in an uncle's studio. He had a commercial art studio. And this is really before the days of photography was sophisticated enough, and everything was drawn. Anything you wanted to sell, I had to draw. It could be, cups and saucers, chairs, tables, or whatever you wanted to sell. And the trouble with it was that I had to tell lies. I had to make everything I saw glossy, beautiful, have highlights, and look fantastic. And this, after a while, it began to worry me. I'm just a liar. Here I am prostituting my art, when I should be telling the truth about the world. If anything, I've been given this tremendous kind of talent, if anything, and I'm not doing it. So it was then I began to try and find a way out of that morass that, was commercial advertising. The one thing it did teach me how to do in the commercial art studio was to draw properly, if you know what I mean, realistically. I could draw a saucepan, or I could draw a bicycle, I could draw anything that you could buy, a car, shoes, whatever. But it was tedious job. And I got out of it by going into cartooning, and it kind of opened up from there. I sent drawings to Punch magazine in London at the time, and they accepted them. And I was, paid, I guess, about $1 a week in my uncle's place. Not that he was mean, but I I wasn't considered a good risk. But then, when I was doing a cartoon, I'd get about, $10 a cartoon. So it was a huge leap. And I could do 50 of them, or 5 of them a week, and make $50 and so on. So I thought, this is the life. This is not what I'm, not sitting there doing saucepans and bicycles and things like that. Anyway, Alan, stop me if you want to, because I'm rolling on here.
No, this is very good. Keep going.
And well, it kind of developed, and I was able to develop it from there into doing cartoons, and eventually there was a satirical magazine in London called Private Eye, which hit the newsstands and everything around about early mid 60s. And it was really shocked people, because it said things in this magazine that weren't normally said. I became the artist of that, one of the artists of that magazine. And it was in there that I really kind of hit the public eye. And suddenly I was transformed from this asthmatic child who'd been doing joke cartoons, really, gag cartoons, I found that I could use my art to describe the world around me, the domestic and the political world in particular. And I began to draw politicians and so forth. And then it all kind of opened up. I can't tell you, I was suddenly renowned, or known, and TV wanted to interview me. I had articles written about me. I was on, it just changed overnight. And from then on, I was able to sort of, to a certain extent, name my own ticket. I had gallery shows. I had TV. I had my own TV show. I had it was endless, and I was taken into the theatre. I began to do costumes and design there. Eventually, I got to know the Pink Floyd, and I worked with them on the wall. And then I was a huge Disney fan as a child. And then one day they just wrote to me from Disney and said, how would you like to be a production designer on Hercules, which I became. That, strangely enough, became about because the man who was the director of this, when he was growing up in Chicago, he was kind enough to say he was a fan of my work. He collected my work. And he remembered me all those years, and he had a big hit with The Little Mermaid, and suddenly he could call his own ticket. And that's when he called me in and said, would you like to be involved in Hercules? And I said, would I? Yeah. But people found it strange at the time that me, with my bitter, grotesque, satirical work, should be allied with Disney, who, as we all know, is renowned for being cutesy. And anyway, I did it. I enjoyed it. So I've had a very, very checkered career. I mean, when I first went to join national newspapers from the satirical magazine, they sent me to Vietnam in the 1960s. I was in Vietnam doing reportage there. They sent me to the 6-Day War in the Middle East. They sent me to Northern Ireland, do it with all the troubles there, and where I was hijacked by the IRA one day, and I can tell you about that if you want to know. And so I've had a very checkered career, starting from that very unpromising beginning. And I mean, to say how did I do it? Well, it's really hard work, of course, but I had the luck to have a talent. Although I say it myself, and other people have told me that, I have a talent to be able to transfer the ideas in my head down my arm onto the paper. But you've got to have those ideas to start with anyway. You've got to have that. And my attitude of mind has always been questioning and satirical, I suppose, sort of cynical. Cynical's another word. And but then, I've been able to turn that cynicism to directing. Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker. I did Nutcracker. I did the costumes and decor for that. So I've been able to spread even the cynicism into a kinder area.